If there's time at the end, and if Krishna permits, I'll find the images I'm looking for. They're images of Tataka. So where our katha is likely to end this evening is Lord Ramachandra slaying his first demon, Tataka. But before we get there, there were some songs that were sung before the kirtan. One of them was Kulashekar, one of the Alvars in the Sri Sampradaya, who was a stalwart Ram Bhakta. We heard about Kulashekar when we were conducting a yatra in South India. Very amazing devotee. Totally on a spontaneous platform of devotion to Lord Ram. So one of the writings that he composed was a description, a song describing Lord Ram's slaying of Tataka. So we're going to hear in part of the katha about slaying of Tataka and purposes of the Lord's appearance, and he begins those purposes for his appearance, at least one of them, in annihilating the demons. Starting with Tataka. And a theme also is in the process of surrender, feeling oneself dependent on the power of the Supreme Lord to give protection. A materialist doesn't feel that way. They think it's weakness or foolish or silly. Be strong. And a spiritualist understands where strength truly comes from, and the strength of a spiritualist is not just to be a weakling, but the real strength comes from the strength of Krishna's protection. So in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs, one of the ones that was chosen, is to understand that the necessity of taking shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, how Narada holds the Lord's lotus feet within his heart, how the goddess of fortune is always serving, massaging, and worshipping the Lord's lotus feet, and any devotee understands that the position of safety, well-being, protection comes their way by the sense of dependence upon the personality of Godhead. And here we're going to be hearing about Vishwamitra Muni. In fact, one whole session is dedicated to Vishwamitra Muni. This is only a little introduction. When Vishwamitra Muni reaches Mithila along with Ram and Lakshman, they accompany Vishwamitra Muni, and all of the sages from his hermitage, Siddha ashram, they're making their way to Mithila to take part in a grand yajna festival that King Janak was organizing. And when they come to the city, Vishwamitra Muni is such a well-known, popular, important, famous personality that King Janak and his entourage and his chief priest come to greet him, and the chief priest of King Janak, the father of Sita, is King Janaka. The chief priest was the son of Gautama. We're going to hear more about Gautama and Ayodhya, his wife. And their son studied under Vishwamitra. He stayed at his ashram and he learned everything from him. He became what he was, along from his father, Gautama. But his father entrusted him to Vishwamitra to train him. So he knew the whole story of Vishwamitra's life from beginning to end, and we'll hear the whole story of Vishwamitra's life from beginning to end. But we're only going to hear a little part of it here, where Vishwamitra, powerful as he was seeking help from Lord Ramachandra. Now, so we'll hear some of the details of that request of King Dasarath to give his son in the charge of Vishwamitra to kill the demons, Marich and Subahu, whose mother was Tataka, so they dealt with Tataka first. Tomorrow we'll hear the rest. But he was taking shelter, as we're trying to take shelter of the personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, for our well-being and protection. In this particular case, it was pretty extreme. 2 demons that were preventing Vishwamitra Muni from doing what he was capable of doing for the benefit of the whole world. During Treta Yuga, the principal means of achieving perfection is through the process of sacrifice, and Vishwamitra Muni was interested in distributing the benefit of that sacrifice to the whole world. It wasn't just accumulating his own piety or merit and prospering, but he was doing the sacrifices for others. Before he came to this area, Siddha Ashram, which is in the vicinity, within the kingdom of Dasarath, within the Koshala kingdom, he was living in the Himalayas for thousands of years, doing something different, doing austerities. Then he left that position, having achieved, we'll hear, the position of becoming a Brahmarshi, the chief amongst Brahmanas. Long story, we'll hear that later. But he left that, so attaining that status and that perfection, he left to come to do things for the benefit of the world, particularly in the form of these yagyas. And the yagyas were being interfered with by Marich and Subahu under the help, under the hest, or to be assistants of Ravana. We'll hear. So he was feeling dependent upon Lord Ram to assist him in that giving benefit to the world. So we may have some service to do. I'm sure we all have some service to do. And part of that service that we want to do is benefit to others. How otherwise, what service? To be of assistance to others, and there's obstacles. It's not always Subahu and Maricha, but some obstacles. And what to do about those obstacles? Well, we depend upon the personality of Godhead. That's the mood, or the theme, and the song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur was expressing that. So, the previous discussion before today's discussion is the Rishishringha being brought by Dasarath along with his wife, the daughter of Dasarath, Shanta, and Rishishringa came and assisted in the performance of the yajna, so that at last, 60,000 years later, finally Dasarath could have a son, and the arrangement was made by Rishishringa, qualified yajna performer, perfectly pure and qualified. So the agent of Lord Vishnu came and presented the payasam, the heavenly nectar that gave the ability of the wives to conceive children, and at least one of the versions of Ramayana described, literally as soon as they took their portion, they felt pregnancy just by drinking that payasam. And for 12 months, a long gestation period, they carried the personalities of Godhead, Lord Ram and his other three expansions, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradumna, and Aniruddha, within their womb. So that's where we're beginning our narration, just prior to the birth of the four, the quadruple expansion, Prabhupada calls it, the aides de camp, which is a British term. The Supreme Lord and his assistants to carry out his mission, whatever his mission is. So, Kaushalya was the first to take the payasam, and she was the first to give birth. So on the ninth day, the Navami of the waning moon in the month of Chaitra, April, May, Kaushalya was taken to the maternity room, and midday she gave birth to Lord Ram. Next morning, very early in the morning, Kaikeyi was taken to the maternity room, and very early the next morning, her son was born, Bharat. And midday, Sumitra was taken to the maternity room, and her sons were born, Lakshman, and finally Shatrughna, in the sequence of their taking the payasam. In the descriptions that we heard earlier, the kind of king that Dasarath was, he didn't just rule by law, he ruled by love. He felt perfect fatherly affection to all of his citizens, and the citizens felt perfectly fatherly affection towards him as king. Repeatedly, as described, they felt more fatherly affection for him as king than for their own biological fathers, and their biological fathers felt that kind of affection for him as well, no enmity or jealousy. So, although everything was great, superlatively great, the best, Dasarath was unhappy because, as a dutiful king, one of his duties was unfulfilled. Very important duty of producing a successor to his kingdom, because the whole Ikshvaku dynasty, this is what they had done, and he was not successful. And so he was sad, feeling incomplete and ineffective in performing his duty. We know what that feeling may be when we're supposed to do some service and it just keeps coming out not right. We don't feel right. So he felt remorse. And so his citizens were also feeling those feelings of their king. And then the expectation of the appearance of the sons was another feeling that the king was feeling, so the citizens were feeling. And when the sons were born, one after the next, then King Dasrath became supremely happy, and the citizens became supremely happy. Everyone was happy. For a while. For a long while. Then something else happened. So Valmiki Ramayana, fortunately or unfortunately, gives very, very little of the childhood pastimes of Lord Ram. Unlike Krishna, abundant description in the Bhagavatam of the childhood pastimes of Lord Krishna. However, the other Ramayanas, they give information, descriptions of the childhood pastimes of Lord Ram, not abundant, but some. So that's where this reference comes from. As one would expect, the babbling of the little children became the delight of all the queens and the attendants to the queens and persons intimately associated with the royal family. As the children went through their growing stages of crawling and then toddling and then all the stages of maturity. The name-giving ceremony, some days after the children were born, was performed by Vashishta, and he gave names according to the character. So here we go with names again, but as we hear the names and a little description of the names as we go on, it'll emerge as visionary. The names are appropriate for the personality. Ram, we know from Maha Mantra, reservoir of pleasure. So Rama was given the name Rama by Vishwamitra, by Vashishta, because of an ocean of pleasure. He would give pleasure to all, just by his nature. And the next given a name was Bharata. And Bharata, by definition, means one who can and would carry heavy burden. His capacity as one who would carry burden was without limit. And he would do so in the mood of service. Specifically, the commentators speak of his being an instrument of Ram, as the servant of Ram, as the instrument of Ram. Ram had a will, and his strength, his being was to carry the burden of Ram's will, and it carried the burden of ruling in the absence of Ram, and then when Ram returned, to assist Ram in his ruling. But that was his name, and that was his capacity, and that's what he did. And we'll also spend nearly a whole session just describing more about Bharata. He's a very important personality in the entourage of Ram's Leela. I'll just mention it. He carried the burden of infamy, although he did nothing wrong. The answer to the following question is yes. The question is, have any of you ever been faulted for doing something that you didn't do? In fact, you wanted to do something that was of good intention for the welfare and benefit of pleasure and happiness of another person, and your intention was read wrong and you were faulted? I see some heads nodding. How do you handle that? Answer: study the character of Bharata. Because he did it hundreds and millions of times greater than us. The fault that was attributed to him, and the persons that were dearest to him and most important to him, except Ram, faulted him in that way. And he had to bear that burden. And he did so successfully. Much to their apology and chagrin for having felt or considered that he was ignoble, a bad person. Anyway, Bharata, the second. And then the twins of Sumitra. First of the two twins was Lakshmana. So Lakshmana, Vashishta explains, was derived. I'm spending time with this because these personalities are going to emerge as we go along. So the names are important. It indicates the character of the person. Lakshmana comes from the word Lakshmi, which means fortune or wealth. But he wasn't interested in material wealth of any kind. His wealth was the wealth of service. And from infancy and throughout life to the very conclusion of the pastimes of Ram, his deep mood, hankering, focus was constantly being by Ram's side and constantly being in the service of Ram. Like Lord Nityananda was for Lord Chaitanya, like Balaram was for Krishna, even more so in extreme manner was the mood of Lakshman towards Ram. That was his wealth. Abundance of wealth. He was the most wealthy. His mood of love and service to Ram. He didn't know anything else. And Shatrughna, the meaning of Shatrughna's name is he who conquers his enemies. Now he's kind of way in the background of the pastimes of Ram. At least his name isn't spoken about so many times as are Ram and Bharata and Lakshmana. Shatrughna's kind of in the background, and he liked being in the background. He was the constant associate of not his brother, Lakshman, but of Bharat. There was this affinity of being always in the mood of the servant of Ram. That's our teaching. It's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching. He was a wonderful example of Lord Chaitanya's teaching. Really great role model of Das-anudas. He just wanted to serve in whatever they did as children and throughout life, just be this constant companion and assistant of Bharat. That's Shatrughna. So names were given, and the children started to grow, and the mothers taking care of their children, and Dasarath being observing this. Those of you that are parents of multiple children or know parents of multiple children know this, that one of the concerns of the parents is that the children get along. So 4 boys, everyone knows. Boys are interesting personalities. And you put 4 of them together, they're almost same age, a day apart. 4 boys, same age, a day apart, and they were perfectly harmonious. Not even a speck, a drop of competition between them, or arguing, or disputes, or anything. Whew. So Dasrath was very, very pleased, very delighted and happy, because of course he's, in addition to being a father, he's a pure devotee, and these are all personalities of Godhead, and so it's a transcendental happiness, in addition to a transcendental fatherly happiness. Perfect situation. A little description of the reasons for the Lord's descent. Of course, He gave protection to the devotees. He annihilated demons, as mentioned. And the first one, Tataka, similar to the first demon that Krishna killed, very interesting symmetry, was a woman, Putana. And there was hesitation on the part of Krishna to kill Putana. And there was hesitation, we'll hear about it this evening hopefully, about the hesitation of Ram, being the upholder of Dharma, to regard a woman as an object to be killed. It just didn't match. But he did under the guidance and direction and instruction of Vishwamitra Muni for a higher cause. His own values are subordinated to the instruction of Vishwamitra Muni, his guru. No small thing. And later in Valmiki Ramayana, there's the third, when Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma sangsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So in the Dwapara Yuga, he appears and gives teachings. Especially this is emphasized in the Adhyatma Ramayana. I'm just going to recite, because on the first evening, yesterday evening, there was some discussion of the sources of reference and differences between Adhyatma Ramayana and Valmiki Ramayana. So this is one. More emphasis on his divinity than in Valmiki Ramayana, although we're going to hear shortly about explicit statements of his divinity in Valmiki Ramayana. There are many, but even more so in Adhyatma Ramayana. But there's sections in Adhyatma Ramayana where he assumes the role of a divine teacher, kind of like what Kapila Muni does with Devahuti, like that. Very, very detailed descriptions. Specifically, Ram reveals himself as a four-handed Mahavishnu from his very birth in Adhyatma Ramayana, like Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa. So, in the Adhyatma Ramayana, and it's in other places, in Skanda Purana, there's Rama Gita, like, Uddhava Gita and Bhagavad Gita. So Rama Gita, very lengthy description of spiritual teachings. Regularly, he's referred to in the Adhyatma Ramayana that Sita is the Shakti, and he is the Shaktiman. He is the absolute Brahman, and she is his Shakti. Not in an impersonal sense of absolute Brahman, because impersonal Brahman doesn't have Shakti, but he's the Supreme Lord. In the Ayodhya Kanda section, we haven't gotten there yet. That's after the marriage of Sita and Ram, and they return to Ayodhya. Narada Muni comes to pay a visit to Lord Ram and reminds him, Ram, you're God. Oh yeah. Don't become too absorbed in your leelas. Narada did something similar. It was a little more discreet when he visited Krishna in Vrindavan after visiting Kamsa and telling Kamsa, Vasudeva tricked you. The 8th child of Devaki is over in Vrindavan. And he's meant to kill you, so you better watch your backside. You're a smart man, I'm sure you'll do the needful. Then he went to see Krishna and told Krishna, I long to see the day when you will go to Mathura and you'll free Vasudeva and Devaki who are suffering in the prison house of Kamsa. I long to see the day when you will kill Kamsa and so many other demons that you appeared in this world for, because the earth came and appealed to you to relieve the burden of the earth from so many demons. I long to see the day when you will travel here and there and kill so many demons. And Krishna's response was, I'm leaving tomorrow. So Narada does things like this. He came in Adhyatma Ramayana to remind Lord Ramachandra of his mission. Kill Ravana and the Rakshasas who were disturbing the Brahmanas and the devotees of the Lord, and the demigods who were dependent upon him. So there's many passages where his divinity and his giving of teachings, long dissertations describing similar things that are found in Bhagavad Gita, the different systems of yoga, the reality of Brahman as the real self, and duty should be done with that understanding, in the mood of achieving spiritual perfection, liberation from the bondage of material existence, and like that. Then another comes later in the Ramayana, after Ram has returned to Ayodhya. He's ruling in Ayodhya, and Vashishta kept his residence outside the capital in a little hermitage. So one time, Durvasa Muni spent the whole 4 months of the rainy season visiting the ashram of Vashishta, observing austerities and observing Chaturmasya in an appropriate way. So one day, Dasarath came to visit both of them, paid his respects to both of them. They offered him a seat, and they were having some discussion. Sometime in the middle of the day, Dasarath happened to ask Durvasa Muni, what's going to be the duration of my life and that of my sons? So immediately, Durvasa Muni started describing. Long ago, there was some difficulty between the demigods and the demons, and the demons were getting the worst of things. So the demons came to the ashram of Bhrigu and took shelter of the wife of Bhrigu, because Bhrigu Muni's wife, being soft-hearted and compassionate, had in the past given them some promise that she would help them and give them protection. So they came to her seeking protection. Lord Vishnu came to know. Lord Vishnu came, and with his Sudarshan chakra, he cut off the head of Bhrigu Muni's wife. Bhrigu Muni became upset. Why'd you do that? I curse you, Bhrigu Muni. Now, we know about Bhrigu Muni from the Bhagavatam, 10th canto. Very exalted, but so he lost his cool. He became angry and cursed Lord Vishnu. You will also, like me, have to experience the loss of your wife and feel great pain of separation as I am going to be feeling. Then he felt, wow, why did I speak like that? And he fell at Vishnu's feet, appealed to him for forgiveness for speaking in that way. And Vishnu accepted his apology and said, I accept your utterance, because the words of the Brahmanas must not go in vain. So Bhrigu said, you will... now this is Dasarath hearing from Durvasa Muni that Lord Vishnu has now become your son, Lord Ram. And the ordeal that Ram had to undergo of separation from his wife was due to the curse of Bhrigu. He said explicitly, your son is Lord Vishnu. And he will rule the kingdom. Now this couldn't have been after he returned to Ayodhya, because Dasarath was already gone. So it's before, when they were still young men, I guess. Sorry about that. Before Kaikeyi requested her boons and so forth. So when they were still young. He'll rule the kingdom for 11,000 years before he completes it. Because Dasarath had ruled for 60,000 years. So he knew. There's another place where he knew before they returned after the marriage, on the way back to Ayodhya. The encounter with Parshuram, and Parshuram told audibly, so Dasarath could hear, that your son is Vishnu. But he couldn't digest it. He couldn't hear it in a way that, oh, he's Vishnu. That explains everything. This madhurya was so strong that it eclipsed even his understanding that his son was the personality of Godhead. There is that mood very strongly in Valmiki Ramayana, the sweetness aspect, although the divinity of Ram here and there emerges. So now we're going to hear a little bit. There's one little section from Valmiki Ramayana, the rest is going to be from Adhyatma and other sources. But a very important verse that Sri Vaishnavas regularly refer to is a verse that's spoken about the relationship between Lakshmana and Ram when they're little boys, childhood pastimes. Sarva priyakaras tasya ramas yapi sharirataha Lakshmano Lakshmi sampano Bahi prana Bahir prana. It's important. It was as if Lakshmana was the prana or life of Ram, but outside. So life air is normally within. So he was like the life air of Rama, but Bahir, outside. He was the second Lord Rama. Sita was told by her father to be like a shadow. He said to Ram, my daughter will be like your shadow. The shadow never leaves the object that it casts. You and Sita will be inseparable. But so also life air and the person and life are not separable. Similarly, Lakshman and Ram are inseparable, literally inseparable. We'll hear. So, Sri Vaishnava commentators like this verse from Valmiki Ramayana, speak about it, write about it, and give their explanation. The elements of the verse, Lakshmi Sampano literally meaning was that Lakshmana was the possessor of great Lakshmi, or opulence. But again, his opulence was his mood of service, in unstoppable, unswerving mood of service to Ram. Powerful. Like Hanuman towards Ram, same. Bahi prana ivapara. It was as if the life air of Ram was embodied outside. Of course, Ram had his own life, but he had a second life, like a second Ram, in the form of Lakshman. And Rama's yapi sharirata. Sharira means body, so he was like an extension of Ram's body. So intimate, so close, so strong was the bond. They weren't born of the same mother, but they had that affection. Mutual, naturally so. But one was the superior and the other was the one who was serving the superior. And that was their relationship throughout. Like Anantashesh and Vishnu. One is serving the other, always, inseparably. It's described that Ram couldn't and wouldn't sleep unless Lakshman was next to him. Ram wouldn't eat unless Lakshman was next to him also eating. Even if think of little boys, where even if the best and most delicious and favorite of foods were placed before Ram, he wouldn't eat unless Lakshman was there with him. When they would go out on horseback, Lakshman would go on horseback with him, riding behind him with weapons to protect Ram. And in a similar manner, Shatrughna felt that affinity for Bharat. Very early, when they were still small children, now this is from other than Valmiki Ramayan source, as happens sometimes, children cry. Those of you that are parents, you can probably agree with me that sometimes children cry. So the children, all four boys, were crying at the same time. And the mothers did what mothers do to get the children to stop crying, but nothing worked. And then it wasn't just normal crying. There was, the other kind, the screaming kind. And they were screaming, and it wouldn't stop. They didn't know what to do. They asked doctors to come, and the doctors didn't know what to do. They asked Vashishta to come. Vashishta surveyed the situation, and he rearranged the cradles so that the cradle of Ram and Lakshman were next to each other, and the cradle of Bharata and Shatrughna were next to each other. So they stopped screaming, but they wouldn't stop crying. So then he stepped back and considered the situation. And then he put little Lakshmana in the same cradle as Ram. And they stopped crying. And then he took the little baby Shatrughna and put him in the same cradle, although it was crowded, as Bharata. And they stopped crying. And they were just looking at each other and giggling and smiling, and somehow Vashishta knew. And the mothers were just amazed. And so they understood thereafter, whenever the children cried, this is the cause of the crying. Just put these boys together and everything's nice. Wouldn't it be great, parents, if that was that easy? And then throughout the life, that same relationship grew and grew and became more deep and more mature, and they were inseparable. There was a mud pastime besides the cradle pastime that's described. And the mud pastime is boys like to play. And they were one time playing in mud. And it was really slushy mud, not thick mud balls, but slushy mud, and throwing slushy mud at each other and laughing and playing. And Kushalya came and Kaikeyi came, and they tried to calm the boys down, and the boys didn't get calm at all. They threw slushy mud at their mothers. And mothers didn't mind it. They were happy and they were laughing. And then Mantra passed by. She didn't like playfulness. She was a very serious type lady. So Ram took an arrow with a big bundle of slushy mud that hit the hunched back of Mantra and got splashed all over with mud slush. And Mantra turned. She wasn't hurt by the arrow, she was hurt by the mud slush that went all over her, and the boys were laughing, and the mothers were laughing, and Mantra wasn't laughing. Mantra, the description is she already had some attitude, a grudge, a disdain towards Ram. The only one in the whole kingdom, envy. She's the rotten apple that spoiled the barrel, at least spoiled Kaikeyi. So the mothers went to pacify her because she was the assistant of Kaikeyi. So Kaikeyi went and tried to pacify her. That was it. 20 years later, it was when Ram was 25, when the boons of Kaikeyi were invoked. She waited 20 years to get back at Ram. Sometimes people don't let go. Something that happens long, long ago. When somebody, in this case, innocent boys, she couldn't forget, she couldn't forgive, she couldn't let go. She wanted to get back. As the boys grew, this is now another pastime, childhood pastime. Naturally, Dasarath was concerned about their education, and so he placed them in the care of Vashishta for their education. And Vashishta was very happy. Now, he knew that these boys are the personality of Godhead. But he also knew not to say that too much to Dasarath, because he didn't see like that. So he entrusted, and Dasarath wanted to be there while he was training the boys. And Vashishta said, "I'm sorry, but you can't hang around while I'm training the boys." And Dasarath said, "Wait a minute. It's part of the tradition. The father is naturally affectionate and wants to oversee the training of the boys." He said, "That's a normal rule. These boys aren't normal. So sternly, you have to leave now." So when Vashishta says something sternly, you obey. So he left. And what Vashishta did was, he began worshipping the four boys. Saying, "You're the personality of Godhead." This isn't Valmiki Ramayana, it's other sources. "And you don't need me to teach you anything, but you're giving me the opportunity to serve you, so I'm going to teach you everything that I know. And in that way, I get the opportunity to serve you. And you're so kind, you accept it." So he taught them everything that he knew. And one of the things that he knew was archery. And the boys, they like sports and they like competition, they like skill. So they were excellent students. And not only with Vashishta, but wherever they went, they would sometimes go here and there, and they would sit at the feet of great sages and hear from them, and eagerly hear, and their appetite to hear was insatiable. And then they put in practice. So they became filled and filled and filled and filled with the best of teachers and teachings, and they became the best of students. They're the personality of Godhead. They're the best of students. They performed that role very nicely. And they engaged others in bound others with affection because they were such good students of such good teachers. As a young man, Ram would go here and there asking about the welfare of just non-royal people, just people. And it was genuinely in whatever he could do to help them in the situation that they had some need for, he would do it expertly and very happily. And so naturally, as a young boy growing up, he built this bond of affection with everybody. Even if there wasn't a personal interaction, they understood this is the nature of this young boy, and he will eventually become the king. So their affection, as they had to Dasarath, went naturally also to Ram. The bond of affection. Very strong. One other childhood pastime, and we'll move on, that's mentioned, and that is Vashishta was training the boys in archery. One time he had to go attend to something, some Vashishta Brahmana business something. So he was away for a bit and the boys were practicing. And they saw one lady pass by that had a particularly large nose ring. So Ram nudged Lakshman, said, "Watch this." And he shot an arrow and the nose ring closed by the touch of, it didn't touch her nose, it just touched the nose ring, and it closed and she was having trouble breathing. Then he smiled and shot another arrow and it became big again. And the lady was very surprised, and how did this happen? And then all of a sudden another arrow was shot and the nose ring flew up in the air out of her nose. And she was reaching for her nose ring, and they shot another arrow and it came back into her nose. And she was flapping her arms, wondering. She didn't know it was the boys, and they were just having fun. Then Vashishta came back. And by that time, the lady had gone, bewildered, confused, perplexed. But the comment is that generally the boys didn't do those things, mischievous things like Krishna did when he was a little boy. Generally they were very sober and very clear in their activities and learning and becoming qualified Kshatriyas, rulers, and exhibiting the character of great personalities. So as the boys grew up, then comes this really big episode of they're not yet 16. So in Vedic culture, boys would get married and girls would get married when they were much younger than today. In this section, when Vishwamitra comes, he says he's not even 16. There's a later section when he says he was 12. So very young. And already Vishwamitra is concerned about their marriage. And he's consulting with his ministers. What do you think should be done about the marriage of Ram and the other boys? As that was going on, Vishwamitra came. Vishwamitra Muni, we'll hear a lot about him, but very powerful personality. Very intense personality. So as he doesn't go out into the public. He just stayed in the hermitages in the Himalayas, and now in Siddha Ashram, just staying with sages. He didn't go out and venture out into big cities and things like that. But he came right to the kingdom of Dasarath. And when he came, he requested the gatekeeper, "I would like audience with King Dasarath." But he wasn't just like patient. The gatekeeper came running, fearful. The description in Valmiki Ramayana is like a hen chased by a dog, like fearful for his life. He ran into the courtroom where the king was seated, and he was in such a state of panic. The king understood, I have to attend to this right away. Fearful, describing this sage, I don't know who he is. He was in a rage and his whole body was trembling and he was impatient and anger personified, and he was glaring at him and threatening to reduce him to ashes unless at once he could be brought before King Dasarath. And as the king was hearing the gatekeeper describe this, in comes Vishwamitra Muni. He didn't wait. He came at once. And Dasarath recognized him. And at once he stood. Vishwamitra Muni announced his presence. I am the descendant of the son of Gadi in the Kaushika dynasty, and I've come to see the king. Immediately the king got off his throne, came forward as is appropriate, not just out of fear but out of culture, and honored Vishwamitra Muni, greeting him, washing his feet, washing his hands, and then some exchange. Now here's those of you that have heard recordings of Prabhupada lectures know this one. What was the first words that the king, Dasarath, said to Vishwamitra Muni? How are you doing in your pursuit of transcendence? That was his first words. Ahi shtam yattam punar janma jayaya. Punar janma jayaya. Sometimes Prabhupada just repeat that phrase. Punar janma jayaya. Victory over birth and death. How are you faring in your pursuit of victory over birth and death, Vishwamitra Muni? And Prabhupada would speak about this, for some duration of time, again and again. This is how devotees, how persons who are on the path of spiritual life greet one another. How are you doing in overcoming the bond that keeps us in the cycle of birth and death? Punar janma jayaya. Ahi shtam yat tam punar janma jayaya. Vishishta Muni replied. Vishishta Muni then inquired about the welfare of the king in so many ways. He inquired about the welfare of Vishishta in so many ways. Appropriate social courtesies were exchanged because they're very cultured and elevated souls. And then the king says to Vishishta, Vishwamitra Muni, it is very rare for such a person as you to come, because you're so absorbed in your life of transcendence. Why would you come to this place? So instead of us going to the place of pilgrimage, the place of pilgrimage has come to us, which is something almost the same thing that Maharaj Yudhisthira speaks in the Bhagavatam to Vidura when Vidura comes, famous verse, you are like a place of pilgrimage, and the place of pilgrimage has come to our palace. How fortunate we are, now our palace is sanctified. Devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. This is the meditation and the service of great souls. They go to places that are less than pure and make them pure just by their presence. Of course, they have to have that capacity of purity. But Dasarath is honoring Vishwamitra Muni in that way. And he says, essentially, there must be some purpose for your coming here besides benedicting us with your presence. So whatever it is that you have come for, the answer is yes. I will do whatever it is that you wish. Please give me some service. He repeated it several times. Whatever is your mission, let me know, and according to my capacity, I will do it. Vishwamitra Muni is very pleased. He said, what else could one expect from a member of the Ikshvaku dynasty to speak in the way that you have? You're a qualified representative of this great assembly. And please know that having given such a promise, it must be upheld. Because in the whole of the Ikshvaku dynasty, never has there been a word uttered that wasn't kept. He's holding him to his promise even before he tells him why he's come. And he explained that my life is conducting sacrifices for the benefit of the whole world. And the place that I conduct the sacrifice is at Siddha Ashram. But at Siddha Ashram there's two demons, two Rakshasas, Subahu and Marich. And when it comes to the time for the final oblations, they come and defile the sacred yajna. And the person who's performing the yajna is spoiled, and it works the opposite way if they become angry and break the purpose of the yajna. So I can't, although I have the power to destroy these demons, I can't. I need some help. This mood of dependence is being expressed. So I've come here, and I've come to ask for your son Ram to come with me to the forest for just 10, 11 days so I can continue this yajna for the benefit of the whole world, and your son can then kill Subahu and Maricha. Dasrath faints. Valmiki Ramayan says he was unconscious for nearly an hour because his love for Ram is so intense, he can't even think the thought of separation from Ram. What to speak of the danger involved. And so, for lack of time, he goes through detail and detail and detail about he's so young, he's not even 16, which is apparently an age when their training is to have been completed and now they're ready to take on some important service. He's not even 16 yet. He hasn't finished school. He's not experienced, he's not mature, he doesn't know the ways of Rakshasas, to go into the forest and deal with powerful Rakshasas. Let me go. I can protect your yajna. I'll bring my 4 Akshohini divisions of soldiers, and we'll defeat Marich and Subahu and any of their assistants. He doesn't say no, but he's not saying yes. Can you tell me something about these demons? So it's this one of these standard things that a Kshatriya wants to know, the opposition, the strength of the opposition. So Vishwamitra Muni mentions the name of Ravana. Ravana, the leader of all the Rakshasas, has as part of his entourage Marich and Subahu. And he's sent them specifically to which was within your kingdom, to our ashram, to stop the performance of yajnas for the benefit of, and what they should do and how they should do it. And they're very powerful. Hearing the name of Ravana, what to speak of then also the power of Marich and Subahu, Dasrath is in disbelief. Why? It would be difficult even for me. who have been summoned by the demigods to help them. Ravana is the conqueror of the demigods. I don't know if I could be able to defeat Ravana. Remember, 350 wives were... No, that was Parashuram, excuse me. He is not at all confident he could defeat Ravana. So please don't ask for Ram to go. No, he doesn't say no. But almost. And further discussion. And so finally, it's not long from Vishwamitra's side, he said, never in the history of the Ikshvaku dynasty has anyone ever gone against their word. You gave your word. If this is your decision, then I'll leave the same way that I came, and may you live a long life of ignoble, sinful quality in the presence of your kith and kin. Like a storm is about to happen. Vashishta intervenes, fortunately for Dasarath, because Vashishta understands the capacity of Vishwamitra Muni. He's created constellations. He has powers of Brahma. He has all the weapons. When he was a king, before he became a Brahmarshi, he received all the weapons of the demigods. He doesn't need help. He wants to give glory and service to your son. Don't be afraid for the welfare of your son. Vishwamitra Muni's power is so great. It's to bring honor and glory to your son. It's for your son's welfare that he's come. And don't disturb Vishwamitra Muni like this. Big mistake. So, Dasarath's overabundant attachment to his son is now relieved because of the quality and caliber of Vishwamitra and his promise to give protection to Ram and Lakshman. And he agrees. Now, these are great souls. We have many examples in Scripture. Time doesn't permit to go through them all. When great souls may be headed in a direction that's not wholesome. Dhruva Maharaj, slaughtering all the yakshas, just to receive the word from Swayambhuva Manu. Stop. He stopped. Just word. The Prajetas, when they were destroying all the forests, just a word from Soma. He stopped. So Dasarath he got it. Just hearing from Vashishta, who he trusted implicitly. My son can go. And he personally went. He didn't send a messenger. He went to bring his son. And then he requested, because my son and Lakshmana are inseparable. Take Lakshmana too. 2 for 1. Kaushalya came and gave her blessings. Dasarath gave his blessings. Vashishta gave his blessings. And off they went that very day. It was morning, and they walked for the whole day. Vishwamitra Muni was testing the boys because they have a big task ahead of them, and he wanted to see what they were made of. When Ram was brought, he didn't ask anything. He was just instructed by his father. I want you to go. There was no discussion about, well, wait a minute, let me think about it. I'm going to get my favorite sandals or something. It was, yes, sir. And his father said, you respect him like you respect me. Whatever he says, you do it. As you have that relationship with me, I transfer that same command to him. Whatever he says, do it. Yes. And off they went. And there was no conversation. Just they walked. He wanted to see, these are young boys, not 16 years of age, and what are they made of? Are they strong? Are they tough? Are they able to take austerity? So they walked along. If you remember that nice image of the river Sarayu, they walked for 1.5 yojanas, so that's 12 miles. 12 miles, less than 16-year-old boys walking with Vishwamitra Muni, saying nothing, just following wherever he said to go. And finally he stopped. He said, very well, you have a nice mood, you're very strong. I want to give you, before the sun sets, I want to give you 2 very important mantras. Listen carefully to the proper pronunciation and so forth, because mantras need to be done in that way. Bala and Ati Bala. And he initiated them into these 2 mantras, saying that these mantras are very special. They will confer upon you you'll never become tired. You'll never become hungry. No demons can affect you when you're asleep or awake. They're the mothers, Bala and Ati Bala, mothers of all knowledge, and inestimable fame and renown will come to you. Nice mantra. So they carried on. Now, when the mantra was given to Ram, and then Ram gave the mantra to Lakshmana, because Lakshmana considered himself to be a student of Rama, a disciple of Ram. And Vishwamitra Muni was respecting that relationship in that way. And they spent the night just lying on grass. Now these are royal princes who are used to palace luxury. They're now sleeping on grass on the side of the river Sarayu. And the boys take transcendental rest. And Vishwamitra Muni wakes up in the morning before the sun rises. And there's a very important verse, again a Sri Vaishnava loved verse, where he enters into the mood of Kaushalya. He doesn't have exactly the mood of Kaushalya because she's the mother, but it's a very significant verse, so significant that in the Sri Sampradaya, at least a number of places in the Sri Sampradaya, when they wake the deities in the morning, they speak this verse that was spoken in Valmiki Ramayana by Vishwamitra Muni to wake Ram and Lakshmana, because they were still asleep and he was awake. They recite this Sanskrit verse where he's appreciating the good fortune of Kaushalya, because Kaushalya each morning would come and wake the boys. That was her service and her motherly loving service. So the commentary explains he has now, we'll hear some more when we, just as we're entering into the kingdom of Janak, that he's now become a pure devotee, because he's gone through a big span of not being a pure devotee at all. But he went to the palace purposely knowing that Ram is Lord Vishnu, but he hadn't associated with him, so he's bringing Lord Vishnu to kill Subahu and Maricha, and then to take Ram to marry Sita. That's part of his mission. But now he's having their direct association, and through that direct association, he becomes perfected devotee. Now remember, he's a teacher He's a guru, a brahmana, teaching two kshatriyas. So it's a role that he's playing, but he's playing the role in the mood of service. And now it comes to the position of pure service, like that of parental affection that Kaushalya has. The verse reads, "How fortunate is Kaushalya, who has begotten you as her son. The sun has risen in the east, and now you, my dear Lord, tiger among men, please arise and perform those duties that are considered divine." So the commentators have a nice time describing the details of this verse. O tiger among men, indicating your role will be that of a great leader. And the affection that he has for them is now on the fully transcendental plane, appreciating the good fortune of Kaushalya, parental affection. So, they wake up, they perform their morning duties, and during the course of the day, they reach a place that's at the confluence of the Sarayu and the Ganges. So the next discussion has to do with the ashram that they see there. So Ram and Lakshman see this very serene and beautiful ashram, and they ask about it. So, how did it become like this? So Vishwamitra Muni, in detail, gives the history of the place. So long ago, Indra had killed a brahmana in the form of Vritrasura. And so to purify himself, he came to this place, and the demigods came and brought celestial waters, and they performed abhishek, and the celestial waters entered the earth, and then the earth became superabundant with supply over time. So as his sins were cleansed, but then there was insufficient food, so there's another nearby forest where there was sufficient food, and Indra was taken care of very nicely. So he then named those two places. Whoops, I'm ahead of myself. I have to back up. We didn't get to that ashram yet. This is the ashram where Lord Shiva had performed some austerities, and Kamadev went at the request of Indra to break the austerities of Lord Shiva, up to the point of Kamadev firing an arrow that struck Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva then turned and with his glance incinerated the body of Kamadev, so that there wasn't even ashes left, there was nothing left. He became disembodied. So then another name for Kamadev is Ananga. Anga means body, and A means no body. So Ananga. So this place became known then as Angadesh. Angadesh, it's one of the kingdoms beyond the Koshala kingdom. And from that time, the followers of Lord Shiva have continued to maintain this ashram and kept it very nice. So they spent the night there, received by the ashram residence and spent the night. In the following morning, they performed their morning duties and they continued their travels. And then this confluence of the Sarayu and Ganges, Ram asks, what's the history? Of course, he grew up by the side of the Sarayu River. And he asks, what's the history of the Sarayu River? And Vishwamitra Muni gives this history, that long ago Lord Brahma meditated very profoundly at Mount Kailash and created from his mind a lake. And therefore the lake became known as Manasa Lake. And the Sarayu River flows from that lake. So that's the history of the Sarayu River. Then they continued a little further and came to a very, very strange, desolate section of the forest. There were no normal behavior of deer and other gentle animals. There were screeching sounds and hissing sounds, and the trees had no leaves and looked very frightening. And Ram asked, what's this? And then he gave this history that I was ahead of myself on, where Indra came to this place, and to relieve himself of the sins of killing Vishwamitra Muni, the celestial waters were provided, and after his bathing, the waters went into the land, and the land then became nourished, and it became a very wonderful place. And he gave it a name, Malada, the one that removes sin. And then there was another nearby forest that provided all the edibles for Indra and the demigods. So he named that forest Karusha, which means the place to remove excessive hunger. So Ram said, well, that doesn't explain why this place looks like it looked like today. It sounds like that was a really nice place. So how did it become like it is today? From a nice place to what it looks like presently. So now comes another long history. There was a yaksha of the name Suketu. And Suketu very much desired a son. So what did he do? He did what everybody else does when they want something. They perform austerities and they seek the benediction from Brahma. So Brahma appeared and said, well, I know you want a son, but I'm not going to give you a son, I'll give you a daughter. But the daughter will be very beautiful and she'll be very powerful as 1,000 elephants. Beautiful daughter as powerful as 1,000 elephants. So he had a daughter and he named her Tataka. As fate would have it, Suketu's daughter Tataka married a demon. That was a mistake. The demon's name was Sunda. So the two children of Sunda and Tataka were Subahu and Marich. Marich, his name means he had big broad shoulders, very powerful. And Subahu he was really expert at wrestling. Marich and Subahu, the two children of Sunda and Tataka. Now Sunda was a demon, so he would go here and there and cause trouble. So one time he went to the ashram of Agastya and was causing trouble to Agastya. Well, Agastya didn't appreciate it. So he reduced Sunda to a pile of ashes. End of Sunda. When Tataka came to find out she who is as powerful as 1,000 elephants came to the ashram of Agastya with her 2 sons, Mrich and Sabahu, and attacking Agastya with the intent of killing him. So he didn't kill them, but he cursed them. You become a disfigured, ugly woman. He didn't take away her power. And you'll become a Rakshasa, disfigured. And your 2 sons similarly become prowlers of the night. Get out of here. So they left, but they were very angry that now not only that Sunda was gone, but now they're cursed by Agastya. So they inhabited this forest that was the forest, an area where Agastya previously had inhabited, and they turned it into this terrible, terrible looking place. And everyone's afraid. Even the animals are afraid to have anything to do with being in this forest. So Tattaka resides here, and I've brought you here to eliminate Tattaka. And I know your training from your mothers and from your father and from Vashishta is to honor and respect women. But she's in the body of a woman, but her conduct is not at all womanly. And he gave details and details and details of her terrible character. And he repeated this story that Lord Vishnu, because he knows he's Lord Vishnu killed Brigu's wife with his Sudarshan chakra when she was giving shelter to the demons, and this Tattaka is worse. She's eating rishis. And she's a terrible person. She is to be punished, even she's in a woman's body. I'm telling you, it's not against the codes of Dharma. You must destroy her. You're the son of the king. The king's duty is to give protection. You must give protection to the rishis. I'm instructing you. And Ram's response was, my father said, whatever you said to do, I should do with obedience. I shall do whatever you say. Please tell me how to find her, and I will destroy her. So he said, just draw your bow. So he drew his bow, and a loud twanging sound that reverberated throughout the whole of the forest. Tattaka heard the sound, "Who dares come into my territory?" Very territorial. And in a rage, she just followed where the sound came from, and this immediately started attacking Lakshman and Ram. Somehow they had a little conversation and said, I don't want to kill her. I'll just cut off her arms so she can't do any harm anymore. So before he was able to do that, she was throwing rocks and boulders and tree trunks, and then Ram fired some arrows and powdered the rocks and boulders and tree trunks, and then she used mystic powers. Sometimes she would assume different forms, sometimes she would become invisible, then shower articles and items to try to kill Ram and Lakshman. It was a battle scene. Vishwamitra Muni said, don't delay. I know that you're hesitating, you don't want to kill her. You have to kill her. And the night is nearly coming, and demons become so many times more powerful. When the evening comes, you won't be able to destroy her easily. Kill her now. The answer was yes. So he took a powerful arrow, pierced the chest of Tattaka, and she came crashing to the ground. The demigods showered flowers. They were so happy. Tattaka's finished. Vishwamitra Muni was very pleased. You've followed my instructions. I mean, a big part of, from my estimation, a big part of this test, the first demon killed by Ram, was one of his values, he had to put it to the side. On the strength of a higher principle, instruction by Vishwamitra, Muni. It was a shastra, it wasn't whimsical. But a deeply held value became secondary to a higher principle that he heard from his teacher, and he accepted it. Now he's the personality of God, it doesn't need teachings and teachers. He's just showing us by example something that's very important. So we'll end there, because they then take rest in the forest and go on in their journey, heading to Siddha Ashram, where he's going to meet Mrich and Sabahu and assist Vishwamitra Muni and the sages there. Now, while he's getting his announcements ready, I'm going to see if I can find these images of Tathaka, because they're really nice. And I think you'll like it. But let's see if I can find them in enough time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Just one announcement. Guru Maharaja's yatra expenses